Welcome to Romans, God's Solution to Our Problem, a devotional series by Sumo Youth. Make sure you've got a pen and your copy of Romans with you, and if you haven't already, pause the video and pray that Jesus speaks to you through His Word today.
Hey guys, welcome to day 19. Big long passage we're reading today, actually, an entire chapter of the book of Romans. Quite a controversial one as well, so maybe take some time to digest it as you read it. And whilst I'm going to give you 3 questions, today might actually be a day where part of taking notes as you do this might actually be you want to write some questions of your own to think more about this passage, or maybe to find someone to answer those questions. But the passage we're looking at is Romans chapter 9. Have a read of the passage, read it slowly, maybe read it a couple of times, see if you can pick up what Paul's trying to say in this chapter. And here's the questions which I specifically want you to think about today, though like I said, I'm sure many other questions will come up for you. The first one is almost thinking back with what we've already looked at through Romans, what Paul's already taught us, but maybe as well if you can find any hints in today's chapter. Is there anyone who has done enough to deserve to be saved by God? Is there anyone who has done enough to deserve to be saved by God? After you've answered that one, think through, in light of that, why is it that God still chooses to save some? Right? So does anyone deserve to be saved? And in light of that, why is it that God still does choose, give promises and choose to save some people? And thirdly, from the very end of the chapter, why is it that Paul says, do the Gentiles manage to find forgiveness and salvation, but the Jews who've been trying to follow God for so long, why do they not? What's the mistake that the Jews made that the Gentiles have got right? So have a read of Romans chapter 9, answer those questions, think up some questions of your own. Pause the video to have a look at the questions and we'll talk again in a couple of minutes. Alright, big chapter, hey. Plenty of reading there, plenty of thinking, I'm sure, to do there. Let's have a look at the questions that we had for this time. Bear in mind as well, we are going to do Romans chapter 9 again. If you come along to Sumo in term 3, or this is day 19, so day 49, we'll be doing Romans chapter 9 again, so we'll be thinking more about this topic. But let's look at the starting questions for this time from Romans chapter 9. The first of those questions was, has anyone done enough to deserve to be saved, to deserve forgiveness from God, to deserve for Jesus to come and die for them? Has anyone actually earned that? Well, we know from all the way through Romans that nobody has. We can look back to Romans chapter 3, where we hear that all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God, that there is no one righteous, not even one. We know that no one can be justified through the works of the law, that is by being good enough and impressing God. We've heard over and over again from Paul that there is no one who has done enough to deserve God to give them a promise of forgiveness. So the second question then, why does God still choose some people to be saved? See, if no one's been good enough, if no one, me or you or anyone else, is good enough to choose God ourselves and follow God ourselves and earn our way to being forgiven, then it must be God who's doing the choosing, God who's doing the saving. In which case, why does He choose to do that? Well, as we look at this passage, we see over and over again words like mercy, compassion, that God wanted to show His compassion to people, that God wanted to show His mercy to people, that God wanted to show His love and His forgiveness. Not only did God want to be just and fair and punish when people deserve it, but God wants to go a step beyond that and show that He is not only fair and just, but He is also merciful and compassionate and loving. And so throughout history, right down to us now, God has reached out and taken people who otherwise wouldn't choose Him and otherwise deserve judgment from Him, and He's grabbed them by the heart and He's changed their heart so that they might respond to Him and follow Him. And that's what this passage is all about, that it's not by people's own desire or goodness that we can find God's promises, but by Him reaching into our life, reaching into our heart and grabbing us for Himself. And that He does that, we see in the passage, so that He can make known the riches of His glory to those who are prepared for mercy, Right? That for some of us, God just wants to show how loving and merciful He can be, and how much He would sacrifice so that we could be saved. It's an amazing thing that He's chosen to do that He never had to do. Our last question was, why is it that the Gentiles have managed to find righteousness when the Jews who were pursuing it never could? For that, we're looking at the very end of our passage, the last couple of verses. And here's the difference. Paul says that the Jews, they've tried to pursue righteousness, they've tried to be made right with God by doing things, by the works of the law, by earning their way to God. And so by trying to earn it, they've never succeeded, they've never been able to live up to God's standards, and so they've failed to achieve the righteousness that they need. But now Paul says the Gentiles, that means not even God's people, people from other countries, people like us, have realized that salvation, righteousness, can't come from us being good enough. Instead, we have to pursue it by faith. Paul says that it's the Gentiles who have pursued righteousness by faith, and that is how they've attained it. But to anyone who wants to pursue righteousness by being good enough, by going to church the right number of times, praying the right number of times, reading their Bible enough, doing the right things, that person will never achieve the righteousness of God. So have a think today. Hopefully some of the things in Romans chapter 9 have challenged you and made you think a little bit harder about who we are and who God is and why He works the way He does. Talk honestly to God about some of those things. If you've got some questions, perhaps find your way to our Facebook page, and that might be a good place for you to message through some of those questions for us to answer them. But have a think about who God is, and especially today, I think pray and thank God that when He didn't have to choose to save anyone, He did. He chose instead to show His mercy and show His compassion to you and I. And let's be grateful for that. We'll see you next time.